I had always believed Johannesburg ran on discipline, rules, structure, and the fear that without them, everything would collapse into chaos. My whole life was built on that belief. My empire, my reputation, my sanity. But all it took was one morning, one boy, to make me question everything I thought I knew. It was a Tuesday, golden, crisp, and annoyingly beautiful. The kind of morning that mocked you for feeling tired. I left my penthouse earlier than usual, tie perfectly aligned, shirt stiff with starch, coffee in hand. Every morning ritual was identical, predictable, and efficient. I preferred it that way. I needed life to obey me. But that morning refused to cooperate. As the elevator doors opened into the lobby of my building in Sandton, I saw my driver, Thabo, waiting beside the sleek black Mercedes, checking his watch with the patience of a man who had mastered endurance. "Morning, sir," he said, opening the rear door. I stepped in, already flipping through my schedule on my tablet. I had a packed day: board meeting, media interview, charity luncheon, inspection at one of my hotels. Everything timed to the minute. "Drop Kelechi at school first," I said. "Yes, sir." My son, Kelechi, sat beside me, 8 years old, sharp-eyed, quieter than most children his age. Ever since his mother passed 2 years ago, he had become even more withdrawn. I tried to fill the void with the best tutors, the best toys, the best everything, but I was painfully aware, grief did not obey money. He wore his school blazer, hugging his backpack tightly. "You finished your maths assignment?" I asked. "Yes, Daddy," he murmured without looking at me. I nodded. Somehow it still felt like failure. The drive to his school along Rivonia Road was usually smooth at this hour, but that morning traffic was crawling. A construction truck had stalled ahead. "Should we take a detour, sir?" Thabo asked. "No," I said firmly. "We don't have time." We inched forward painfully until we reached a congested intersection near the bus station. Street vendors were weaving between cars, hawking fruit, newspapers, and second-hand phone chargers. Homeless individuals drifted along the sidewalks, some with signs, some with nothing but blankets around their shoulders. I usually ignored them all. Not out of cruelty but efficiency. If I allowed myself to care about every struggling soul, I would never get through the day. But then something pierced through my carefully constructed detachment. "Kelechi," a child's voice shouted, a sharp, youthful call that jolted my attention. I turned my head sharply. There, sitting cross-legged on the pavement near the traffic light, was a thin boy, no older than 10, maybe 11. Dust-covered jeans. Oversized faded sweater. Bare feet. His hair twisted into little coils that looked like they hadn't seen water in days. But it was his eyes that struck me. Bright. Alert. Fearless. "Kelechi," he called again, waving energetically. My son's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. He opened the car door before Thabo could stop him. "Kelechi," I snapped, grabbing his wrist. "What are you doing?" "That's my friend," he said, already halfway out of the car. "Friend?" My son had a homeless boy as a friend? Before I could protest, Kelechi wriggled free and ran toward him. "Sir, should I fetch him?" Thabo asked, alarmed. "No," I muttered, stepping out myself. "I'll handle it." I hated public scenes. Especially here, right in the middle of traffic, people staring, vendors whispering. But my son was now sitting on the pavement beside the boy, bumping fists like they knew each other well. I approached them, adjusting my cufflinks to hide my agitation. "Kelechi," I said sternly, "you do not run out of a moving vehicle." "Sorry, Daddy," he murmured. "But this is Tapua. I told you about him." Tapua. The name stirred nothing in my memory. Which meant my son had indeed told me, and I had probably nodded absent-mindedly without listening. I finally looked at the boy properly. He was barefoot. His elbows were scraped. His sweater had holes. And yet, he sat upright, confident, as though he belonged anywhere he wished to be. "Good morning, sir," he said politely, accent hinting at Zimbabwean roots. "You know my son?" I asked flatly. "Yes, sir. I teach him math sometimes." I stared stunned. "You teach him?" "Yes, sir," he said with the seriousness of a lecturer. "He sits with me before school. I show him easier ways to solve the problems. He learns very fast." I felt heat rising in my chest. Confusion, embarrassment, maybe even guilt. My son was being taught by a homeless boy on the pavement? "Kelechi," I said slowly, "why didn't you tell me this?" "I did, Daddy. You were always busy." The words stabbed harder than they should have. I crouched, lowering myself to their level. "Tapua," I said, "where are your parents?" He shrugged. "My mother passed last year. My father got deported. I stay with my auntie sometimes, but most days I come here to help people with directions or carry things so I can buy food. My chest tightened. And, you teach maths? His eyes lit instantly. Yes, sir. I love numbers. I want to be an engineer. Before I could respond, Kelechi rummaged in his backpack, pulling out a battered exercise book. Daddy, look. He taught me how to do long division in my head. He scribbled quickly, solving a problem faster than I expected. Tapua grinned proudly beside him, nodding in approval like a tutor. Traffic behind us honked loudly. Vendors paused in curiosity. Drivers craned their necks. I suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable, like the world was watching me fail at fatherhood. I stood up abruptly. Kelechi, I said stiffly, say goodbye. We need to go. But Daddy? No arguments. Tapua lowered his gaze. Goodbye, sir. Goodbye, Kelechi. My son hugged him tightly. The boy didn't hug back at first, maybe from surprise, but then he wrapped his skinny arms around Kelechi. I swallowed hard. Then I did something unexpected, even to myself. Tapua, I said, are you hungry? He looked up, confused. Yes, sir. Come with us. His eyes widened. Sir? You mean, get in the car? Yes. Because something in me, something old, something buried, whispered that walking away from this moment would be unforgivable. Tapua hesitated, glancing around as if seeking permission from the universe. Then he nodded. Tabo looked at me through the windshield, completely baffled. Kelechi beamed. And the homeless boy climbed into my luxury Mercedes, sitting cautiously beside my son, holding his torn sweater closed with one hand. I took my seat, closed the door, and exhaled slowly. Maybe this was foolish. Maybe I would regret it. Maybe my carefully organized day was about to spiral into chaos. But something told me, deep in the place where intuition speaks louder than pride, that this boy was going to change everything. Tabo, I said softly, drive? The car eased forward into traffic. And just like that, the life I knew, controlled, structured, predictable, began to unravel. The moment the car door shut and we began moving, the tension inside the Mercedes felt thick enough to touch. I wasn't used to silence, not this kind. My world was normally full of controlled noise. Emails pinging, assistants reminding, business partners insisting, news channels talking. But this was different. This was the kind of silence that demanded emotional honesty, something I had spent years avoiding. Tapua sat stiffly, hands folded tightly in his lap. His bare feet curled against the carpet as if he feared staining it. His eyes darted everywhere, the leather seats, the tinted windows, the digital dashboard, as though he had been dropped into an alien world. My son, on the other hand, glowed with pride. Daddy, Kelechi said, beaming at me, isn't it cool that Tapua is riding with us? His smile was wide, rare, precious. It struck something soft inside me. Yes, I said, clearing my throat. Yes, it's fine. But nothing felt fine. Everything felt unfamiliar, off balance. I wasn't scared of danger. Tabo was a fortress behind the wheel, but I was scared of emotion. The boy's presence stirred something I had avoided for 2 years, the ache of losing my wife, Nanal, and the truth that I had been parenting through money instead of heart. We reached Kelechi's school, a prestigious private academy with red brick walls and immaculate sports fields. The sight of Tapua beside Kelechi made a few parents stare openly. One mother froze mid-step, clutching her designer handbag tighter. Heat crept up my neck. Tabo opened the door for Kelechi. My son stepped out, then turned to Tapua. Wait for me after school? He asked. Tapua smiled shyly. If your daddy allows, yes. He said daddy, with such innocence that I felt the words land deeper than intended. Kelechi hugged him quickly and ran toward the entrance. I expected Tapua to follow me back into the car, but instead, he lowered his head respectfully. I can get out here, sir, he said. I know the way back. I stared at him. Back? To the street? Yes, sir. I don't want to disturb your day. Thank you for the ride. He began to step out, but something inside me reacted instinctively. No, wait. I touched his shoulder. The boy froze. You're not going back there. He looked up, puzzled. Sir? You said you're hungry. Yes, sir. Then you're coming with me. Confusion flickered in his eyes as if kindness was a foreign language. For a moment, he hesitated, as though he feared he had misheard me. Then slowly he nodded and stepped back into the car. We drove away from the school, merging into the morning bustle of Johannesburg. Sir, Tabo said carefully, his voice carrying that diplomatic caution he always used when he disagreed with me. Where should we go now? Home, I said. Tabo blinked in the rearview mirror. Home, sir? Yes. He said nothing more, but I saw his brow furrow. I wasn't thinking clearly. That much I admitted. But I couldn't send the boy back to the street. Not after seeing how bright he was. How proudly he had taught my son. How he had spoken with dignity despite his circumstances. I pressed my fingers against my temple, trying to make sense of the sudden wave of responsibility washing over me. My penthouse in Sandton was not exactly designed for guests, especially not barefoot children who lived on the street. But as we pulled into the private driveway, I felt oddly calm and terrified. We stepped out. Tapua's jaw dropped. The building was tall and sleek, the glass windows reflecting the blue Johannesburg sky. The entrance smelled of jasmine, polished tiles, and money. Residents passed in tidy suits, heels clicking, conversations brisk and shallow. Tapua held his sweater closed and looked down at his feet. "Sir," he whispered, "I don't belong here." His honesty sliced straight through me. "Maybe not," I said. "But you're here anyway." I swiped my card and the elevator opened. He stepped inside slowly, staring at everything as though he had entered a museum. When we reached my floor, he hesitated again at the doorway of my penthouse. A spacious living room stretched before him. Cream sofas, floor-to-ceiling windows showing the skyline, marble floors so clean they reflected light. I saw the boy shrink into himself, suddenly aware of how small and fragile he looked in such an environment. "You can sit," I said gently, gesturing to the sofa. He perched at the edge, afraid to sink into the cushions. "Are you allergic to anything?" I asked. "No, sir." I moved to the kitchen and opened the fridge. Normally, I kept only healthy meals prepared by my cook: grilled chicken, salads, soups. Nothing child-friendly. I grabbed what I could find. Within minutes, I placed a plate in front of him. Warm food, juice, and fruit. He stared at it with disbelief. "For me?" he asked, eyes wide. "Yes." He picked up the fork with trembling hands. Then he ate. Slowly at first, then as though he hadn't eaten properly in days. Every bite felt like a weight pressing on my heart. I sat across from him, not touching my own coffee, just watching. Something unfamiliar twisted in my chest. Was it pity? Guilt? Or something deeper? "Sir," he said between mouthfuls, "thank you." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. His gratitude was too genuine, too raw. It had been a long time since someone had thanked me without expecting something in return. When he finished, he sat back, exhaled deeply, and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Where do you usually sleep?" I asked. "Sometimes with my auntie, but she moves around a lot. Some nights I sleep near the bus station. If it rains, I go under the bridge." My stomach tightened. "And school?" I asked gently. He shook his head. I stopped. My auntie couldn't pay the fees. But I read books people throw away. That explained the intelligence, the confidence, the hunger, not for food but for knowledge. "So you want to be an engineer?" I asked. His face brightened instantly. "Yes, sir. I love how things work. Cars, machines, buildings. I read anything I can find. Sometimes I listen to people talk outside the university in Braamfontein." His enthusiasm was contagious. "What about your parents?" I asked softly. The brightness dimmed. "My mother, she died of pneumonia," he whispered. "My father tried to get proper papers, but he was taken. I don't know where he is." There it was. The loneliness behind his bravery. The silence that followed was heavy. I felt the weight of my own memories pressing against it. The hospital. The beeping machines. Nonal's last breath. Kalechi's tiny hand in mine, shaking with confusion. Loss recognizes loss. Maybe that was why this boy unsettled me so much. Because I saw myself in him, and I saw my son in his innocence, and I saw my failures laid bare. I leaned back, overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do next. I had brought him here on instinct, but instinct was not a plan. And I was a man who always had a plan. "Sir," he said gently, noticing my silence, "should I leave?" "No," I said quickly, too quickly. "Just stay until I decide what's next." His eyebrows lifted. "You don't have to decide now, sir. I can go back later." The fact that he said it without fear, without resentment, crushed something inside me. Before I could respond, my phone rang. My business partner, Cabello. I stood and stepped aside. "Where are you?" Cabello asked sharply. "The board has been waiting. You're an hour late." I closed my eyes. I had forgotten everything. The meeting. My schedule. The day itself. All because of a barefoot boy with bright eyes. "I'll be there soon," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. When I turned back toward the living room, Tapua was standing by the window, staring at the skyline with awe. His reflection in the glass looked small, fragile, hopeful. And in that moment, I knew this boy was not someone I could help for just one morning. This was not a random act of charity. This was a divine interruption. A shaking. A mirror. A responsibility I did not ask for but could not ignore. Tapua, I said quietly, I need to go to a meeting. You will stay here until I return. His eyes widened. Stay? Here? Yes. But, sir, this place is too clean for someone like me. My throat tightened painfully. You let me worry about that. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. I turned to leave, grabbing my briefcase, heart pounding at the decision I hadn't fully processed. As the elevator doors closed behind me, one thing became clear. I had just stepped into a story I was not prepared to live. And the boy in my penthouse was going to change everything I thought I knew about wealth, fatherhood, and purpose. I left my penthouse with a racing pulse, unsure whether I was late for my board meeting, or late for something far more important in my soul. As the elevator descended, I rubbed the bridge of my nose, trying to steady myself. My life had always obeyed structure. But since meeting Tapua, every predictable line in my world had begun to blur. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into the lobby, my mind torn between spreadsheets and a barefoot child sitting in my living room. A man like me wasn't built to juggle such contradictions. I could manage CEOs, investors, bankers, but not feelings. Sir, Tabo said, waiting patiently by the Mercedes, everything all right? No, nothing was all right. But I simply nodded and got in. As we drove toward the business district in Santon, my mind kept drifting back to my penthouse. Was the boy scared? Did he feel safe? Was he touching things he shouldn't touch? Was he okay being alone? I hated this loss of control. Sir? Tabo's voice cut through my thoughts. You're very quiet. It's been a strange morning, I muttered. He hesitated before saying, that boy, he seems polite. I looked at him sharply. You think I made a mistake bringing him home? Tabo chose his next words carefully, too carefully. I think, he said slowly, that you did what your heart told you. But your heart and your schedule are not friends, sir. Despite myself, I let out a small breath of laughter. We pulled into the underground parking of my company headquarters, Laquana Holdings, a sleek steel and glass tower that had become my empire's crown jewel. Normally, I walked into meetings like a general entering a battlefield. But today I felt off balance. As I stepped into the boardroom, every face turned toward me. Shareholders, executives, lawyers. Cabello stood at the head of the table, his expression tight. You're late, he said. I'm aware. He handed me a file, mouth set in a firm line. We've been waiting. I had an unexpected situation. Cabello arched a brow. Unexpected meaning? I paused. How could I explain it? I brought a homeless boy into my penthouse because he taught my son maths. Because my son smiled. Because I felt something I hadn't felt in years. They would never understand. It's personal, I said simply. A murmur rippled through the room. In the business world, personal was code for weakness. But I didn't care. Not today. We began the meeting, profit margins, expansion proposals, logistics delays. Numbers I usually loved. Today they felt meaningless. My mind kept drifting back to the boy in my home. Halfway through a presentation, I caught Cabello watching me with narrowed eyes. What is it? I asked quietly. You're distracted, he said bluntly. I'm fine. You're lying. I stiffened. Cabello had been my closest friend since university. He recognized my masks too easily. Talk to me, he said under his breath. Not here. When the meeting finally ended, Cabello followed me into my office and shut the door behind him. All right, he said, arms folded. What's going on? I exhaled slowly. You remember my son told me about a boy who helps him with maths? Yes. I thought it was a story. He's real. And he's homeless. Cabello blinked. What? Twice. And? He repeated, trying to make sense of it. And I brought him home, I said, rubbing my forehead. He's in my penthouse right now. There was silence. Heavy. Sure. Cabello stared at me like I had grown a second head. You brought a street boy into your home? He asked. Into your living space? Yes. Into your penthouse? Yes. Into the space where your son sleeps? I clenched my jaw. He's just a child. And children can steal too, Cabello snapped. Children can lie. Children can manipulate. He hasn't asked me for a cent. That's how the clever ones work. My temper flared. Don't call him that. Cabello studied me closely. You've changed. What? You, he said slowly, the man who has always kept his emotions locked behind bulletproof glass, are suddenly bringing barefoot children home like some kind of savior. It's not like that. Then what is it? I shook my head helplessly. I don't know. I just couldn't leave him there. Cabello softened slightly. Is this about Nano? The name hit me like a punch. I swallowed hard. Everything is about her. Cabello sighed deeply. I miss her too, my brother. But be careful with your heart. It's waking up after a long sleep. That is dangerous. I said nothing, because he was right. At noon, during my lunch break, I stepped out onto the balcony of my office, phone in hand. I called my home security line. Any issues? I asked. No, sir. The boy is inside watching television. Very quietly. I released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. By 1:30 p.m. I couldn't focus on anything else. I wrapped up the rest of my meetings early and told Tabo to take me home. Everything okay, sir? He asked again. No, I whispered. But also, yes. Yes, because I wanted to go home. Something I rarely felt since Nano passed. When we reached my penthouse, I braced myself for chaos. Toys scattered. Food spilled. Valuable items broken. But the moment I stepped inside, I froze. The living room was clean. Spotless. The plate he'd eaten from earlier had been washed and neatly placed on the rack. The cushions were arranged tidily. And there, on the far end of the sofa, sat Tapua, legs tucked under him, hands folded, eyes glued to the television, watching a documentary on skyscrapers. He turned when he heard me. Sir, you're back. I didn't touch anything. I cleaned the plate. I wiped my feet on the mat when I went to the bathroom. Slow down, I said softly, approaching him. It's all right. He stopped talking instantly. I sat across from him, taking in the sight. His small frame. His hopeful eyes. His polite posture. And my heart tightened again. Were you bored? I asked. No, sir. This show is very interesting. They are explaining how tall buildings stand without falling. It's like magic. It's called engineering. He grinned. Yes. My favorite. For a moment, the room felt lighter. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Kelechi's school. Your son is ready for pickup. I stood. We need to go get Kelechi. Tapua jumped to his feet. Can I come? I hesitated. He must have seen the doubt in my eyes because his shoulders drooped. You don't have to say yes, sir, he murmured. I understand. His humility crushed me. Of course you can come, I said. You're with me. His head shot up, eyes shining. Really? Yes. He smiled, wide, bright, grateful. I hadn't seen a smile like that since my wife passed. When we arrived at the school gates, something extraordinary happened. Kelechi came running out and he didn't run to me. He ran to Tapua. Hi. You waited for me, he cried, hugging him tightly. Tapua hugged him back. And I watched, stunned, as my son, my quiet, grieving, withdrawn son, laughed freely for the first time in months. Parents stared again. Teachers whispered. A security guard frowned. But none of it mattered, because my son was alive again. As we walked toward the car, Kelechi held Tapua's hand. Daddy, he said brightly, can Tapua come home with us? I looked at the boys. One rich, one poor. One polished, one barefoot. Yet they stood together like brothers carved from the same story. I exhaled slowly. He's already coming home with us, I said. Kelechi cheered. Tapua's eyes glistened. And something inside me shifted. A door I had kept locked for too long, opening. I didn't know then that this moment would mark the beginning of a battle I had never imagined fighting. A battle against the past. Against the system. Against judgment. Against myself. But for now all I knew was this. Two boys were sitting in my back seat, laughing, talking, sharing dreams. And for the first time since my wife died, I didn't feel alone. When we returned home with the boys chattering in the back seat like birds at sunrise, I felt something strange, something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Warmth. Not the warmth of sunlight or wealth or comfort. The warmth of life. The warmth of sound, children laughing, feet tapping, dreams spilling out of little mouths that had not yet learned to doubt themselves. As Tabo parked in the driveway, I could hear Kelechi telling Tapua. And when Mommy was alive, she used to make jollof and let me lick the spoon. That was my favorite part. Tapua giggled softly. My mother used to make sweet tea when I was sick. I liked that too. I froze. Those two memories, tender, innocent, painful in equal measure, hung in the air like ghosts. I saw Kelechi look at me quickly as if checking whether he had said something wrong. I forced a smile. It's okay, I said gently. You can talk about your mother. He nodded slowly. Tapua looked down, twisting his fingers. I miss mine too, he whispered. For a moment, the entire car felt full of absence. 2 boys missing women who had shaped them, and a man who still hadn't healed from losing the love of his life. Tabo cleared his throat, aware of the tension. Should I open the door, sir? Yes, I murmured. Inside the penthouse, the boys kicked off their shoes. Well, Kelechi kicked his off, Tapua still didn't have any. They rushed to the living room and dropped their bags, their laughter echoing through the halls. I watched them run around, unable to decide whether I felt proud, terrified, or exhausted. Probably all 3. Daddy? Kelechi called. Can we watch cartoons? Yes, I said. But, slow down. No running. They both nodded, then immediately continued running. I sighed. Children had a talent for obedience that only worked when no fun was involved. I walked to the kitchen and took out 2 glasses. Kelechi, I called. Ask your friend what juice he wants. Apple, the boys shouted in unison. I poured 2 glasses for them. A cup of black coffee for myself. But as I watched them drink their juice, something hit me. Tapua was holding the glass with both hands. Carefully. Delicately. Almost reverently. Not like a boy drinking juice. Like a boy holding something precious. I swallowed hard. Do you like it? I asked. He nodded eagerly. It's very sweet, sir. Thank you. I cleared my throat. You can just call me Uncle. Or, if that's weird, you can use my name. What's your name, sir? I blinked. In the rush of the morning, I had never told him. My name is Luyanda. He repeated it slowly, carefully, as though committing it to memory. Luyanda. Hearing my name in his small voice tugged at something deep inside me. The boys watched cartoons for about 15 minutes before Kelechi asked the question I'd been dreading. Daddy, can Tapua stay for dinner? I hesitated. Not because I didn't want him there, but because I had no idea what I was doing. I'll think about it, I said. Okay, Kelechi said, unconvinced. Tapua lowered his gaze. Sir, he murmured, I don't want to cause trouble. I can leave whenever you say. I can go back to the place where I sleep. It's not far. I know the way. Something hot and angry surged in my chest. Not anger at him. Anger at a society where a child genuinely believed survival depended on not inconveniencing anyone. You're not going anywhere, I said firmly. Not until I decide. He nodded silently. Around 4 p.m., my younger sister, Nambula, called. She was the only immediate family I had left, aside from Kelechi. A widow, a church leader, a woman with a heart big enough to swallow entire cities, and a mouth sharp enough to startle grown men. I answered. Brother, she said immediately, why am I hearing strange things? I blinked. Strange like what? I drove past Kelechi's school earlier and people were talking. Something about you picking up a street child. Is there truth in that, or have people taken up drinking before sunset? I sighed. It's true. Silence. Then. You did what? I brought the boy home. You brought a homeless child into your penthouse? Yes. Leanda, she shouted like I was still 10 years old. Has grief finally loosened the screws in your head? It's not like that. Then what is it like? Because from where I stand, it looks like you have lost your mind. I stepped onto the balcony, lowering my voice so the boys wouldn't hear. He's not a thief. He's not dangerous. He's a child. A brilliant child. He teaches Kelechi maths. Goodness, she muttered. You say it like that makes it normal. I rubbed my forehead. I couldn't leave him on the street, Nambula. You are not a rescue center. He has no food. No home. No mother. Her voice softened slightly. And now what? You want to adopt him overnight? No. I just want to help him. How long will he stay? I don't know yet. That's the problem. You don't know. I exhaled shakily. Nambula was not wrong. But she wasn't completely right either. Just, come by this evening, I said. Meet him. Fine, she said grudgingly. But if I find out you've brought danger into that house, I will report you to yourself. I laughed despite the tension. What does that even mean? I don't know, but I will find a way. She hung up. When I stepped back inside, I found the boys on the floor with a pile of Lego bricks. Kelechi was instructing. Tapua was building. And from the look of those bricks, he wasn't building randomly. He was creating structure. Is that a bridge? I asked. Yes, uncle, Tapua said, eyes sparkling. but it's not strong enough. This part will collapse because there is no support here. And this joint needs reinforcement. I knelt beside him, staring. The child saw engineering where others saw toys. Who taught you this? I asked quietly. Books, he said. Sometimes old newspapers have pictures of buildings. I try to understand how they stand. I felt something shift inside me. Not pity. Recognition. Purpose. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Nambula. I braced myself. When she walked in, she scanned the penthouse like a detective examining a crime scene. Then her eyes landed on the boys. Kelechi waved happily. Tapua lowered his head, unsure. Nambula blinked. He's tiny, she whispered under her breath. I almost laughed. She crouched in front of him. Hello, my child. Good afternoon, Ma, he whispered. You know, I heard you teach maths? Yes, Ma. She narrowed her eyes. Are you good at it? Yes, Ma. How good? He solved a quick multiplication problem in his head. Nambula's eyebrows jumped so high they nearly left her face. Well, she muttered, that explains why my brother is behaving like a man hypnotized. I groaned. Nambula. She held up a hand. I'm not here to fight. Just observing. Then she looked at the boy again, and her expression softened in that deeply maternal way she had mastered long before she became a mother herself. Have you eaten? She asked. Yes, Ma. Do you want more? No, Ma. You will eat anyway, she declared. I smiled. Kelechi whispered to Tapua, Auntie Nambula doesn't take no for an answer. And he was right. Within minutes, she had entered my kitchen, taken full command, and begun preparing dinner. The scent of garlic, tomatoes, peppers, and thyme filled the air. Tapua's stomach growled audibly. Nambula pretended not to hear. I didn't. Come, I said gently. Let's wash your hands. Dinner is almost ready. Dinner was quiet at first. Then slowly the boys began talking about school, cartoons, dreams. Nambula asked questions gently, carefully, drawing out the shy bits of Tapua's personality. When he mentioned his mother, she froze, then reached across the table and touched his arm. I'm sorry, my child. He nodded silently. After dinner, she pulled me aside while the boys continued playing. Leanda, she whispered, I still think you're not thinking clearly. Nambula. But, she said softly, I see the boy, and I see your son, and I see something good. I swallowed. But good things can become dangerous if you don't handle them well, she finished. I nodded. She squeezed my shoulder. Just be careful. And deliberate. That child is too fragile to be picked up and dropped again. Her words stayed with me long after she left. By 8 p.m., the boys were asleep, Kelechi in his bed, Tapua curled up on the sofa under a blanket I had given him. I stood watching him breathe. Small. Innocent. Tired. Brilliant. A boy the world had discarded. A boy fate had placed in my hands. And as I looked at him, one terrifying question formed in my mind. What if this boy is not temporary? What if he is meant to stay? What if I am meant to change his life? And what if he is meant to change mine? I wasn't ready for the answer. But the answer was already forming. Waiting. Growing. I had always believed that money could insulate a man from chaos. It was one of the lies I wrapped myself in like a winter coat, especially during the early days of building my empire. Money meant stability, order, predictability. But that afternoon, sitting in my glass-walled office at the Santon headquarters of Okoro Global Logistics, I felt the seams of that lie coming apart. My phone buzzed for the 4th time in 10 minutes. It was my son's school. Again. I sighed, bracing myself. When I answered, the receptionist whispered as if she didn't want to be heard over the corridor noise. Mr. Okoro, we need you to come. My stomach clenched. Is my son injured? No, sir. But it's about his behavior. I closed my laptop. I'm on my way. As I left my office, James looked up from his workstation. Sir? Everything all right? No, I muttered. Let's go. He followed me out, concern shadowing his face. He didn't press, he never did when my jaw was tight like that. And it stayed tight all the way to the school. The school counselor's office smelled of carpet cleaner and cheap lavender spray. My son, Tund, sat on a small chair in the corner, his face troubled but stubborn. Beside him sat Kaido, the homeless boy I had impulsively brought into our lives. The counselor adjusted her glasses. Mr. Okoro, they walked out of class again. I stared at the boys. Again? Tund looked away. Not to play, the counselor continued. To teach. Or rather, for Kaido to tutor him. I blinked. Teach what? Mathematics. Algebra. Your son insists he learns better from his friend. I lowered myself into a chair. Is that against any school law? The counselor cleared her throat. It's disruptive. And unusual. Unusual. That was the word people used when they wanted to call something unacceptable but were too polite to say so. I turned to the boys. Why leave class? Tun spoke first. Because Kaido explains things in a way that makes sense. The teacher gets angry when I don't understand. My chest tightened. I had known about his struggles, but hearing him say it openly, it stung. Then Kaido spoke, his voice soft but steady. Sir, he isn't slow. He just learns differently. He needs someone to break things into pictures. Pictures? I remembered the sketches in my study. The way Kaido explained to him without one drop of frustration. The patience. The gentleness. But still, this was school. There were rules. Systems. Structures. And running out of class is the right solution? I asked. No, sir, Kaido murmured, head bowed. We just didn't know how to ask for help. A silence sat in the room, heavy and unyielding. The counselor leaned forward. We can arrange additional support. But your son cannot continue leaving class. It encourages dependency. Her eyes flicked to Kaido just for a second. I felt heat rise in my throat. Dependency? On what? Kindness? Understanding? Before I could respond, a soft knock appeared on the doorway. It was Tun's math teacher, Ms. Makona, a woman with stern eyes softened only by her age. I heard what happened, she said gently. May I speak? The counselor hesitated. We're in a meeting. But Ms. Makona walked in anyway. She knelt in front of Tund, not like a teacher but like a grandmother. Show me, she said softly. Explain how he teaches you. And just like that the boy stood up. Tund lifted a piece of chalk from the desk and moved to the small board on the wall. Kaido stood opposite him. The counselor's eyes widened. Boys. But I raised a hand. Let them. They began. In 30 seconds the room fell silent. Completely. Even the faint hum of the air conditioning felt muted. Kaido drew shapes, circles, triangles, arrows. He broke equations into pieces, linking them visually. He explained negative numbers using shadows. He explained variables using footsteps. He explained fractions using slices of an imaginary pap. And my son, my stubborn, distracted, easily frustrated son, followed with a clarity I had never seen in him before. When they finished, silence flooded the room again. Ms. Makona swallowed hard. This is extraordinary. The counselor stiffened. But it doesn't justify breaking school structure. Structure without compassion, I said quietly, is just a cage. The counselor flinched but remained silent. Then I exhaled slowly and turned to the teacher. What do you suggest? Ms. Makona smiled at the boys. Let them work together. Under supervision. In an approved space. After school. Perhaps even before school. If the arrangement benefits both, I don't see harm. It does, I said. It clearly does. The counselor wasn't convinced, but she lacked grounds to object. Eventually she sighed. We can arrange supervised tutoring sessions. But only if both students agree to follow school rules. Both boys nodded eagerly. The meeting ended. As we left, Kaido walked behind us quietly, his hands clasped, shoulders tight as if waiting for punishment. When we reached the car, he finally whispered, Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Trouble? I looked at him. You helped my son. He looked at me, really looked, and something flickered in his eyes, something I recognized, disbelief that an adult might see value in him. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You won't be punished for caring. He stiffened, then slowly nodded. But inside my chest, something shifted again, another ripple, another crack in my old beliefs. That evening, after dropping the boys at home, I asked James to linger. What do you think of him? I asked. Kaido. James folded his arms. He's a good boy, sir. Too good for the life he had. I exhaled. I want to help him. More than food and shelter. James's eyebrow rose. How much more? I stared out at the Johannesburg skyline, the glittering glass towers catching the sunset like molten gold. I want to enroll him in school. Properly. James's eyes widened. Sir, that's huge. I know. And risky. I know. And once you start, you can't withdraw it later. He'll build a life around it. I know, James. He held up his hands. I'm not against it. I'm just saying, think carefully. This boy, he'll bond. He'll trust you. He'll lean on you. Are you ready for that? I swallowed. The truth was, I wasn't sure. But when I pictured him sitting in that school office, head bowed, apologizing for teaching, of all things, I felt something clench inside me. A child with that kind of mind should not be on the street, I said softly. Not if I can change it. James studied me, his expression shifting from caution to respect. Then, he said quietly, let's do it right. That night after dinner, I called the boys to the study. They sat side by side on the couch. Tund looked curious, Kaito looked afraid. I leaned forward. Kaito, how long has it been since you attended school? His voice trembled. 3 years, sir. 3 years. And do you want to go back? He nodded slowly, his throat working as if swallowing a stone. Yes, sir. More than anything. I took a breath. I want to enroll you. In a proper school. Not as a visitor. Not as a temporary guest. As a student. For a moment he didn't react. Or maybe he did, but his face was too shocked to move. Then his eyes filled with tears, quiet, trembling tears that slipped down his cheeks like rain breaking through clouds. I don't know what to say, he whispered. You don't have to say anything. He bowed deeply, not to the ground but to a depth that shook something in my soul. Thank you, sir. Beside him, my son grinned, his whole face lighting up. Dad, does that mean he can stay with us longer? I smiled despite myself. Yes, it does. And just when I thought the moment was over, Kaito did something unexpected. He reached for my hand. Gently. Tentatively. As if touching something sacred. I froze, not because I minded but because of what the gesture meant. Trust. Hope. Belonging. I closed my fingers around his small hand. You're safe now, I said softly. And you're not going back to the streets. He sobbed once, quiet but deep, and nodded. And in that moment I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just helping him. I was becoming responsible for him. A guardian. A father figure. A man he would trust completely. And that kind of responsibility did not fit inside the neat, controlled world I'd built. It demanded something deeper. Something I wasn't sure I had. But I would learn. I had to. Because that night, when the boys went to bed and the house grew quiet, I realized, for the first time in years, my home felt alive. And I wasn't ready to lose that feeling. Not ever again. The morning sun spilled over Johannesburg like a slow, warm wave, casting long beams through the dining room windows. Normally, breakfast was a quiet affair. My son munching cereal while scrolling on his tablet, me sipping coffee with my eyes half open, already thinking about meetings and numbers and logistics routes. But lately, with Kaito in the house, everything felt different. Livelier. Softer. Warmer. That morning, I walked downstairs to the sound of laughter. Real laughter. Boyish, bright, unrestrained. When I stepped into the dining room, I found both boys huddled over a small notebook, whispering and drawing. My son looked up, grinning. Dad, guess what we made? Before I could answer, Kaito lifted the notebook. It was filled with drawings, arrows, symbols, shapes, all forming some elaborate puzzle. It's a math game, he said shyly. To help him practice. My son bounced slightly. And I'm winning. I chuckled. Good. Keep winning. But as I sat down, watching them carefully piece together equations disguised as pictures, the enormity of the previous night's decision settled on me again. I had promised to enroll a homeless boy in school. Not a temporary act of charity. A life-altering commitment. And although I felt certain it was the right thing to do, anxiety simmered beneath my ribs. What if I failed him? What if I crossed lines I wasn't prepared to cross? What if the world saw this as something inappropriate, irresponsible, or foolish? But then I looked at him, his thin fingers gripping the pencil, his brows furrowed, his gentle voice teaching my son with patient joy, and the doubts quieted. Some decisions were made by logic. Others, by the heart. And mine had made its choice. After breakfast, I drove the boys to school myself. I wanted to speak to the administrator about the transition plan for Kaito. And honestly, I wanted to be present, fully present, for once. As we approached the school gates, my son leaned forward between the seats. Dad, do you think the kids will like him? I glanced at Kaito in the rearview mirror. He sat quietly, his posture straight, his eyes focused on his hands. I think, I said carefully, some will. Some won't. And that's okay. What matters is how he carries himself. Kaito nodded. I'll behave well, sir. I won't cause trouble. You're not trouble, I said more firmly than I expected. He looked up, surprised. You're a child learning to find your place, I added. That's not trouble. His shoulders loosened. Just a bit. We pulled into the parking lot and I placed a hand on his back as we walked toward the office. It was meant to reassure him, but I realized it reassured me just as much. Inside, the principal, a tall woman named Mrs. Dlamini, stood waiting. She had an expression I had seen many times among professionals dealing with powerful men, polite, cautious, and prepared for displeasure. "Mr. Okoro," she greeted. "I heard you wanted to discuss something important." "Yes," I said. "About this boy." She looked at Kaito and something in her expression shifted, softened perhaps. "This is the young man who's been helping your son?" "Yes." "And you wish to enroll him?" She blinked, genuinely surprised. "That is a significant request." "I'm aware." We went into her office. The boys sat outside, legs swinging, whispering to each other. The principal folded her hands on her desk. "Does he have guardians? Papers? Identification?" "He has nothing," I said quietly. "But he has a mind that deserves a chance." She exhaled. "The process will be complicated. Social services may need to be involved." I stiffened. "Is that necessary?" "Legally, yes." I rubbed my forehead. I had dealt with government bureaucracy before, but never on something this delicate. "I'm willing to handle all costs," I said. "Uniforms, books, fees, transport, everything." "It's not the cost that concerns me," she replied. "It's the legalities of guardianship." The word hung in the air. Guardianship. I had not yet said it out loud. Had not even allowed the syllables to form in my mind. But the principal saw something in my expression and softened. "I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying we'll need proper documentation. And a plan." I nodded. "A plan?" I murmured. She smiled faintly. "I admire what you're doing. Truly. We don't see enough men make this kind of effort." Something tightened in my throat. Praise always made me uncomfortable, especially when I wasn't sure I deserved it. After we finalized preliminary steps, I stepped outside to collect the boys. My son looked up immediately. "Did she agree?" "Not yet. But we're working on it." Kaito swallowed hard. "If it's too difficult, sir, you don't have to." I knelt slightly to meet his eyes. "Hey, look at me." He looked. "I didn't start this to stop halfway." His lips trembled, but he nodded. I sent them to class, then stood by the car for a moment, letting the morning breeze cool my thoughts. Responsibility. Legality. Guardianship. Things were moving faster than I had anticipated. But I would keep going. I had to. When I arrived at the office, James was waiting at my door. "How did it go?" he asked. "Complicated." He nodded knowingly. "As expected." We went inside. I placed my briefcase on the desk and stared out of the window, where the city shimmered in the late morning haze. "James, how do you think people will see this?" He shrugged. "Some will say you're doing something noble. Others will say you're taking unnecessary risks. Some may even think you're trying to look like a savior." I groaned. "Wonderful." "But," he added, "at the end of the day none of them matter. What matters is why you are doing it." I paused. "Why am I doing it?" I murmured. James smiled. "Because you're human, sir. Despite everything you pretend." I snorted. "You enjoy teasing me, don't you?" "It's my salary's favorite part," he said with a grin. I laughed. But then my phone buzzed. A message from the principal. "We need to discuss something urgent regarding the boy." My stomach flipped. I immediately called her back. "Mrs. Dlamini, what's wrong?" Her voice was tense. "We received additional information. Something troubling." My heart thudded. "About what?" "About the boy's past." I froze. "What about it?" "There may be reasons he avoided the system for so long. And reasons he was alone. I don't want to say more over the phone." I swallowed hard. "Is he in danger?" I asked. "No. Not directly. But you need to come. Today." "I'll be there." When the call ended, James looked at me sharply. "Sir?" "Something's wrong," I whispered. A ripple of fear went through me, not for myself, but for that boy who had looked at me with such trust. I grabbed my keys. James followed. As we drove back toward the school, the city blurred past in streaks of color. A thought pounded in my mind. What truth could be so urgent? So troubling? So heavy that the principal had refused to say it over the phone? Another question followed it. Would this truth change everything? Or would it make me hold on to that boy even tighter? When we arrived, the principal led me into a private conference room. She closed the door. Then she placed a thin, crumpled file on the table. "This was found in the city's missing persons archive," she said quietly. "It matches his description." I stared. My throat tightened. Missing? I breathed. She nodded. And that's not all. She took a deep breath. According to this file, the boy's father is still alive. My heart stopped. Alive. Alive. The word echoed in my head like a drum. She continued softly. And he has been looking for him. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table, steadying myself. For a long moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, because suddenly, everything I believed about the boy, everything I thought he had lost, everything I planned to give him, was no longer certain. And the world I had started building around him trembled with the weight of that revelation. And in the quiet that followed, one truth cut through everything. If his father truly existed, then my place in that boy's life might not be what I thought it was. It might not even be mine to hold. Not unless fate had other plans. Not unless the story was far more complicated than a missing file. Not unless danger still lingered in the shadows of his past. One thing was certain as Chapter 6 closed. My journey with Kaido was only beginning. And so was the storm. For a long time after the principal delivered the news, I simply sat there, silent, unmoving, my mind a swirling mix of shock and denial. The idea that Kaido had a living father, a father searching for him, was not a possibility I had prepared for. I had assumed abandonment, tragedy, loss. The kind of story that explained why a bright, gentle boy was alone in a city that swallowed the weak. A missing persons file changed everything. The principal slid the folder closer. Mr. Okoro? I understand this. I do. But if this information is accurate, we cannot proceed with enrollment without contacting the authorities. The word authorities made my pulse spike. Authorities. Bureaucracy. Investigations. Social workers. Questions that could disrupt the fragile, blooming trust between the boy and me. I closed the folder, my hands slightly trembling. Do you know where the father is? I asked. She hesitated. The file is 3 years old. The father's last known address was in Pretoria. There is a possibility he moved. Or stopped searching. Stopped. I repeated, a sharpness creeping into my voice. She looked down. These cases are complicated. Sometimes guardians give up, sometimes they... Not this boy, I cut in. Not him. She held my gaze for a long moment. I believe you care for him, Mr. Okoro, and I admire that. But we must handle this responsibly. Responsibly. The word tasted bitter. Because responsibility in my world meant two things. Control and certainty. And right now I had neither. When I walked out of the office, James stood waiting in the hallway. His expression darkened as soon as he saw my face. What happened? I handed him the file. He skimmed it, eyes widening. Missing? He whispered. Yes. And the father, alive? So they say. James whistled under his breath. This complicates things. That's an understatement. We walked to the car slowly. Reality weighed heavily on my shoulders. As we approached the parking lot, I noticed two small figures sitting on a low wall. My son and Kaido swinging their feet, laughing about something only boys find funny. They looked peaceful. Safe. Like they belonged to each other. Like they belonged to me. Kaido saw me and waved, smiling nervously. I forced a smile back. But something inside me cracked. Because I knew. The world I had begun building could shatter with one knock on the door. I opened the car door for them. Get in, boys. But before he climbed in, Kaido tugged gently on my sleeve. Sir, is something wrong? My heart squeezed. He had learned to read my moods faster than most adults. We'll talk at home, I said softly. His eyes flickered with fear, but he nodded. The drive home stretched like a lifetime. My son chatted happily, oblivious. Kaido remained quiet, watching the road, chewing the inside of his cheek, an old habit of children who expect bad news. When we arrived, I sent the boys upstairs to wash up before lunch. I stayed in the living room, staring out of the glass wall at the garden. Johannesburg wind rustled through the palm trees, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. James stood by the staircase waiting. What's the plan? I don't know, I whispered. He frowned. That's not like you. I know. A silence stretched. Then he stepped closer. Sir, be honest. Are you afraid of losing him? I swallowed hard. Yes. Already? Yes. James nodded as if he had expected that answer. He leaned against the wall, arms folded. I've seen you do many things, sir. Hard things. Dangerous things. But I've never seen you change the way you have since that boy entered this house. I didn't plan it, I muttered. Most blessings don't come planned. I almost smiled. Almost. Should I contact a lawyer? James asked. I shook my head. Not yet. First, I need the truth. All of it. From him. James nodded. I'll give you privacy. The boys came down a few minutes later, each holding a plate of fruit I had never seen them willingly choose before. Tun flopped onto the couch, but Kaido hovered in the doorway like he expected lightning. I sat on the single armchair and gestured. Come here. He approached slowly, clutching his small plate. My voice was gentle. Kaido, I need to ask you something important. And I need you to be honest. He nodded, shoulders tightening. Do you remember your father? The fruit plate shook in his hands. He stared at the floor. I asked if you remember him, I repeated softly. After several seconds he whispered, yes. My stomach dropped. Is he alive? I asked. A tear slipped down his cheek. I think so. You think so? He wiped his face. He was, when I last saw him. The room felt suddenly too quiet. What happened? I asked. And the story began to unfold, piece by trembling piece. My father, he wasn't bad, Kaido said. He was just sick. He had trouble working. Sometimes he forgot things. Sometimes he slept more than he should. But he always took care of me. Always. He sniffed, rubbing his nose. But one day, we were walking near the station. He collapsed. Just fell. People helped. An ambulance came. They took him. Kaido paused, shaking. They said he needed treatment in Pretoria. They told me to wait at the shelter until someone came back for me. His voice broke. No one came. I closed my eyes, breathing through the weight of it. I waited 1 day, 3 days, a week. He swallowed. Then the woman at the shelter said I should go to a children's home. But I was scared. So I left. You ran? I asked gently. Yes, sir. And you never saw him again? He shook his head violently. No. I looked. For months. I asked people. I walked to places we used to go. But I never found him. Tears streamed freely now. And I thought, maybe he died. Maybe that's why he never came for me. I reached forward, placing my hand on his. Kaido, I whispered, listen to me. He looked at me with broken, shining eyes. You did nothing wrong. A sob tore from his throat. He covered his face with his hands. My son moved closer, placing an arm around him, whispering, it's okay, it's okay. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my own voice. Kaido, someone filed a missing persons report for you. 3 years ago. His head snapped up. And me? Yes. His breath shuddered. My father? We don't know yet. He blinked rapidly, struggling to process. Does this mean he's alive? He whispered. It's possible. Hope exploded across his face like a sunrise. Then fear smothered it. Sir, if he's alive, will you send me away? My heart twisted painfully. I leaned forward, gripping his shoulders firmly but gently. Look at me. He did. I will never abandon you. His entire body shook. Even if your father comes, I continued softly, you are safe here. Nothing will happen to you. Do you understand? He burst into tears again, collapsing into my arms as though the reassurance broke him open. My son held him too, both of them clinging to me. James watched from the stairs, his eyes shining. I realized then that this bond, this strange, unexpected family, had grown deeper than I had noticed. And it wasn't going to be easy letting go of any of it. But I also knew one thing with absolute clarity. Whether the boy's father was alive or not. Whether this missing persons file led to reunion or danger. Whether the future pulled him in or out of my home. I would fight for him. As fiercely as any father. That night, when the boys were asleep and the house hummed with silence, I returned to the living room. James approached with a glass of water. What now? I stared out of the window, the city twinkling like constellations. We find the father. You're sure? He asked. Yes. I need answers. And the boy deserves the truth. And if the father wants him back? James asked quietly. I clenched my jaw. Then, we decide what is safest. For the boy. For everyone. James nodded. I'll make some calls, he said. Quiet ones. As he walked away, I whispered into the empty room. Whatever happens, I won't lose him without a fight. And far away in the quiet darkness, somewhere between Pretoria and Johannesburg, the truth waited. And so did a man searching for the child he lost. And maybe someone else searching for the same boy for reasons far more dangerous. The next morning, the city seemed to hum with a strange energy. Johannesburg's skyline glimmered in the early sunlight, but my mind was elsewhere, churning, restless, anticipating. Every plan I had made for Kaido's future, Every careful thought about schooling, safety, and belonging, now balanced on a delicate thread. One misstep, one phone call, one unexpected arrival could shatter it all. I had spent the early hours making quiet inquiries. My contacts in Pretoria, social services, private investigators, all discreet. And the answers were beginning to trickle in, fragments of a puzzle that I hadn't realized was missing so many pieces. James arrived just as I was reviewing the notes. "Sir," he said, voice low, "I've found a lead. The father. His name is Saifo Dlamini. Lives in a modest house on the outskirts of Pretoria. Works as a mechanic." I exhaled slowly. And he's been actively searching. Contacting authorities, posting notices, checking shelters. For 3 years. 3 years. My chest tightened. Kaito had been waiting, wandering, surviving, and now the father was real. Alive. Intentional. I rubbed my forehead. "We need to be careful. He doesn't know Kaito is here." James nodded. "I'll make sure no one leaks it." I hesitated, pacing. Do we go to him? Contact him? Or wait? James considered. Waiting risks exposure. Going risks confrontation. But sooner or later, someone has to meet the truth. I stopped pacing. "We go." But quietly. James raised an eyebrow. "Sir, are you sure?" I nodded, more to convince myself than him. "He's a father. He deserves a chance. But this boy, he belongs here too. I won't let that be taken from him." James didn't respond. He simply knew that when I made a decision, there was no halfway. By mid-morning we were on the road to Pretoria. The silence in the car was heavy, broken only by the occasional instruction to James regarding routes and privacy. I couldn't stop thinking about Kaito, about his small hands, the way he trusted me, the nights he slept in my penthouse, feeling safe for the first time. I glanced at James. "When we meet him, we tell the truth. No games." James nodded. "And if he refuses to listen?" I clenched the steering wheel. "Then we negotiate. Calmly. Firmly. But Kaito comes first." I swallowed. He couldn't be taken lightly. The father might be desperate, angry, protective, or worse. By noon, we arrived at a modest home in a quiet Pretoria neighborhood. James parked a few blocks away. We approached on foot, blending into the streets. The smell of grilled meat from a nearby braai lingered in the warm air. Children played soccer on a cracked sidewalk. Life went on, oblivious to the storm about to collide with it. I adjusted my tie and took a deep breath. "You go in first," I told James. "Make sure it's safe." He gave a small nod. "Sir." He disappeared up the path to the door. I waited, my heart hammering. Every step, every rustle, every dog bark outside the fence made my pulse spike. Then James signaled. "Thumbs up. Safe." I stepped forward and knocked. The door opened slowly. A man in his early 40s stood before me. His face was rugged, sunburned, and lined with worry. But there was an unmistakable spark in his eyes when he looked at me. Recognition? Suspicion? Both. "Can I help you?" he asked cautiously. "My name is Leanda Okoro," I said, holding his gaze. "I'm here about your son." The man blinked. "Saifo, that's my son?" His voice trembled. "No," I said softly. "But he's your son. And he's here, safe." Saifo stepped back, inviting me in. I glanced at James, who remained outside, silent but alert. Inside, the house smelled of oil, metal, and home, simple, lived in. Photos lined the walls. Saifo as a boy, family pictures, a faded photo of a small boy standing beside his father. I swallowed. "We need to talk. About Kaito." Saifo's shoulders stiffened. "Kaito, he's alive?" "Yes." The name hit him like a punch. He moved closer to a chair, gripping the arm tightly. "Alive, after all these years?" "Yes," I said again. "But I need you to listen carefully. He's been living with me." Saifo froze, eyes widening. "Living with?" I took a breath. "I brought him into my home in Johannesburg. He's safe. He's learning. He's thriving. But now, you are looking for him. And the truth is, you need to know where he is." Saifo sank into the chair, shaking his head. I didn't know where to start. I searched everywhere. Shelters. Friends. Police. I thought I had lost him forever. I could see the raw anguish in his eyes. A father's pain. Genuine, deep, unrelenting. "I know," I said softly. "And I'm not here to take him away from you. But you need to understand he has adapted. He trusts me. He calls my home his safe place. He calls my son his friend. He has never been safe until now." Saifo's hands trembled. He buried his face in them, whispering, 3 years, 3 years? I didn't know. You didn't fail him, I reassured. Circumstances did. But now the responsibility is ours, together. He looked up slowly. His eyes red, haunted, yet searching mine. Together? Yes, I said. But carefully. He is fragile. And we cannot let the past harm him again. Saifo nodded, swallowing hard. I want to see him. I want to hold him. Then we arrange a meeting. Slowly. Calmly. You and him with supervision. And I will be there. Always. A long silence fell. I could feel the tension in the room like a living thing. Saifo's anger, grief, and desperation mingled with my caution, my protectiveness, and the weight of a decision I hadn't expected to make so soon. Finally he whispered, I don't know if he will forgive me. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Forgiveness comes with trust. And trust comes slowly. But he will learn you are trying. And we will all try together. Saifo's eyes filled again with tears. This time not of anger but of longing. He had lost 3 years, but hope was something we could give him back. As we left Saifo's home, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily against me. Kaido's father was alive, searching, desperate, and yet, he had no idea what he would find. James looked at me. Sir, you're stepping into dangerous territory. I nodded. I know. But I promised him. And no matter what, I will not let him be hurt again. Not by life, not by circumstances, not by anyone. James exhaled slowly. Then we proceed carefully. That night when I returned home, I found Kaido in the living room, asleep under the blanket I had given him, his small chest rising and falling. My son slept soundly in his own bed, clutching a small toy. I sat beside Kaido, staring at his peaceful face. His innocence, his trust, his small life, had become a responsibility I had never anticipated. And now, with his father alive, searching and finally found, everything had changed. Everything. The storm was coming. And I would have to fight for the boy who had taught me to live again. The days that followed were a blur of planning, calls, and quiet anxiety. I moved with care, balancing the fragile world Kaido had grown accustomed to with the reality of a father who had been searching for him for years. I arranged everything meticulously. Meetings with social services, private investigators, and the school administration. I even briefed my son, who was both excited and anxious about the impending reunion. Tund had grown protective of Kaido, often placing a small hand on his friend's shoulder, as if shielding him from the unpredictability of adults. Kaido meanwhile remained quiet, observant. A small shadow of fear and hope flickered across his face every time we discussed his father. I realized then that children, even those who seemed fearless, carry invisible weights far heavier than we imagine. Finally the day arrived. I brought Kaido to a neutral location, a small community center in Johannesburg, chosen for its calm atmosphere and security. The social worker was waiting, clipboard in hand, eyes professional but gentle. Saifo would arrive soon. Kaido, I said softly, kneeling to meet his gaze, are you ready? He nodded slowly, hands clasped tightly in front of him. His voice was barely audible. I think so, sir. I reached out, squeezing his shoulder. Remember, you are safe. Always. He swallowed, nodding, and followed me into the waiting room. We waited. And waited. Minutes stretched into an eternity. And then the door opened. Saifo walked in, cautious, hesitant, but his eyes locked on the boy immediately. His steps slowed, and his face softened in a way that only a father's eyes can soften. Kaido froze as if the air itself had turned heavy. Dad. His voice was a whisper, trembling like fragile glass. Saifo's eyes widened. Kaido, my son. For a moment the world stilled. The air was thick with years of loss, longing, and unanswered questions. Kaido stepped forward slowly, each movement careful, as though approaching something sacred yet fragile. Saifo dropped to one knee, arms open. It's me, Kaido. It's really me. Kaido froze. His hands twitched. His eyes darted to mine as if seeking permission, reassurance. I nodded slightly, smiling softly. He's safe, I whispered. You can go. Slowly, Kaido stepped into his father's embrace. The reunion was anything but perfect. Tears, questions, confusion, words rushed out like a river breaking its banks. Kaido's small voice trembled as he asked questions he had carried in silence for 3 years. Why didn't you come back? Why didn't anyone tell me? Saifo's voice cracked as he explained his illness, the hospital, the misplaced addresses, the desperate search that never ended. Every explanation was soaked with regret, and yet Kaido's expression remained a mixture of relief and fear. Relief that his father was alive, fear that the safe world he had known with me might vanish. I watched silently, every muscle in my body tense. This was the moment I had feared. The moment that could undo all the trust Kaido had built in the last few months. And then something remarkable happened. Kaido, trembling, looked up at his father. I'm glad you found me. But I like it here. I feel safe here. With Leanda and Tund. Sifo blinked, stunned, then nodded slowly. I understand, son. I don't want to take that from you. I only wanted a chance to be with you again. Kaido let out a shaky breath and nodded. And then, cautiously, he returned to the hug, this time less fearful, more curious. I realized in that moment that parenting, real parenting, was not about ownership or control. It was about presence, trust, and the willingness to let go when necessary. Sifo looked at me then, his eyes uncertain, seeking approval, or perhaps an unspoken agreement. I offered him a small nod. He's yours too, I said softly. But you must earn his trust. And you must respect his life now. Sifo exhaled, relief flooding his face. Thank you, he whispered. I promise. Kaido pulled back slightly, his small hands resting on both of our arms. I like both of you. Can we be together? A chill ran through me. Together. The word carried hope and danger, love and complication. Could two fathers, two lives, and one boy coexist without destroying the fragile balance we had built? I think we can, I said cautiously. But carefully. Slowly. One step at a time. Kaido smiled faintly, and for the first time in days the tension lifted, just enough to allow hope to bloom. But hope has a way of drawing attention. As we prepared to leave, I noticed a man lingering outside the community center. He was dressed in dark clothing, his posture rigid and his eyes sharp. Something about him screamed danger, calculated, deliberate. I nudged James discreetly. See him? James followed my gaze and stiffened. Sir, he's watching Kaido. That's no ordinary bystander. My stomach dropped. I had feared this, someone from Kaido's past, perhaps from the streets, or worse, someone who had observed his vulnerability and intended harm. I took a step forward. Stay close. Do not let him approach. The man lingered, then disappeared into the crowd. But I knew this was only the beginning. Kaido, oblivious to the shadow outside, held both our hands as we walked back to the car. I realized then that safety was never absolute. It was something we built, piece by piece, moment by moment. And threats, both known and unseen, would challenge every step of that construction. Back in the car, the tension eased slightly, but my mind raced. Sir, James said quietly, we need to consider security, both for the boy and for his father. Whoever that was, he wasn't just watching. I know, I replied, gripping the steering wheel. And we need to protect him. No mistakes. Not now. Kaido sat quietly, resting his head against the window, his small hands clasped in his lap. He didn't yet know the dangers lingering in the shadows, but I knew I had to shield him, no matter the cost. Because one thing was certain. Once you bring hope into a boy's life, you cannot afford to let the world steal it away. And in Johannesburg, danger often comes quietly, patiently, waiting for the perfect moment. That night, when Kaido was asleep, I reviewed security plans, potential threats, and every person who might have a reason to harm him. Sifo, despite being a father, was still unfamiliar with the realities of the streets that had shaped Kaido. I realized then that my role was not over. It had changed, evolved. I was no longer just a temporary guardian. I was protector, strategist, and advocate. And the storm on the horizon promised to test every ounce of patience, courage, and ingenuity I possessed. The reunion had brought joy, yes. But it had also awakened shadows. Shadows that would not wait patiently for the boy to adjust. Shadows that could strike at any moment. And as I stared out the glass walls of my penthouse that night, Johannesburg lights twinkling below like distant stars, I whispered, whatever comes, I will not let him go. Not now. Not ever. The storm was no longer distant. It had arrived. The morning sun rose over Johannesburg like a spotlight on a stage, illuminating a city that had no idea of the quiet storm brewing in its streets. For me, the past few days had felt like walking a tightrope above an abyss. Kaido's father was in the picture now. Hope had returned, yes, but so had danger. The man we had seen outside the community center lingered in my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. Who was he? What did he want? And how much had he learned about Kaido's life over the months? I glanced at James as we drove toward Kaido's school. We need to move fast, I said. If that man is still tracking him, we can't risk the boy walking alone. James nodded. I've arranged for extra security near school. But we have to anticipate everything, sir. I exhaled slowly. We've come too far to let him get hurt now. The school was quiet as we arrived, early for once. Kaito held my hand tightly, his small fingers curled around mine like a lifeline. My son, Tund, walked beside him, eyes wide with anticipation. Today we would introduce Saifo officially, carefully. Inside the office, the principal, Mrs. Dlamini, and a social worker waited. The room was tense but organized. Saifo arrived shortly after, and the moment he entered, the air seemed to shift. Kaito's gaze met his father's, and for a long moment, they simply stared at each other. No words, just a silent acknowledgement of the years lost, the pain endured, and the bond that had always existed, waiting to be reclaimed. Saifo knelt once more. Kaito, oh my son, he whispered. Kaito hesitated, then stepped forward slowly. I'm glad you found me, he said quietly. But I'm scared too. Saifo's hands trembled as he reached for his son. I will never hurt you. I promise. And with that, Kaito allowed himself to be embraced, cautiously, as though testing the safety of the world for the first time. It was a delicate reunion. Tears, questions, apologies, and explanations poured out. Kaito's small voice wavered between relief and fear. Saifo explained the past, the illness, the hospitalization, the missed connections, and Kaito listened, absorbing everything while still clinging to the safety he had found in my home. I stood quietly in the background, observing. This was not my place, yet I was still part of it. And I realized something profound. Family was not about ownership. It was about presence, trust, and protection. Even as a father himself, Saifo had to earn this trust again. And I had to ensure Kaito's life remained uninterrupted by the chaos that had once defined it. But life has a way of testing newfound peace. Just as we were preparing to leave the school, James noticed movement outside the window. The man, the stranger, was back. Clad in dark clothing, he lingered near the entrance, eyes sharp, scanning the area. I stepped forward quietly. We cannot let him get close. James nodded. I've already notified security. But he's patient. He could wait hours, days. I clenched my jaw. Then we confront him. Before he confronts the boy. Security arrived, surrounding the perimeter. The man hesitated, realizing he had been spotted. But he didn't flee. Instead, he approached slowly, calm, deliberate. I stepped out to meet him. Who are you? I demanded. He smirked, the faintest edge of menace in his expression. I'm someone who knows things about this boy. Things that could ruin him, if he's not careful. I felt a cold weight in my chest. What do you want? He paused, eyes flicking to Kaito, who clutched his father's hand tightly. I want what's owed. What was promised to me when I first met him. He belongs to someone like me. I felt rage flare. No. He belongs to no one but himself. And he's safe. He's under my protection. Under all of ours. Saifo stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. Leanda is right. He's my son. But he's also yours to protect. And together, we will not let anyone harm him. The man's expression darkened. But before he could respond, security intervened, escorting him away. He glared one last time, a promise of future threats in his eyes, before vanishing into the city streets. I exhaled slowly, muscles relaxing slightly. For now, Kaito was safe. Back home, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. Kaito sat between Tund and Saifo, sharing a small plate of food, laughing softly. I watched, my heart swelling with pride and relief. Saifo looked at me, eyes glistening. Thank you, he said quietly. For protecting him, for being there when I couldn't. I smiled faintly. We both have a role. And we must share it carefully. His life is bigger than both of us. Kaito's small hands rested on both our arms. Can we be together like this? He asked. I nodded, softly, feeling the truth of it in every fiber of my being. Yes, together. Slowly. One step at a time. And in that moment, I realized the lesson the boy had taught me all along. Family is not defined by blood alone. It is defined by trust, protection, and love. By the courage to care for one another, even when life is messy, unpredictable, and frightening. The days that followed were calm but full of adjustment. Kaito attended school, guided by both his father and me. He thrived, learning, laughing, growing stronger with each day. Saifo proved to be a gentle, patient father, learning how to nurture and rebuild trust. Tund continued to be the loyal friend, a protective brother in spirit. The bond among the three of them strengthened, forming a new, blended family, a family shaped by loss, resilience, and the courage to love. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood in the living room watching the boys play outside. Kaito ran, his laughter carried on the wind, Sifo chasing him and Tun cheering. James approached quietly. "Sir, you did well." I nodded slowly. "No, we did well. Together." James smiled. "And what about the man outside? The one who threatened him?" I turned toward the fading sunset, the city lights beginning to twinkle. "We remain vigilant. But life is not about fear. It's about courage. And Kaito, he has taught me that courage comes in the form of love, patience, and trust." James nodded, understanding the unspoken words. That the boy's journey was still unfolding, and though storms might come, he was no longer alone. That night, when the boys were asleep, Sifo and I sat in the study, quietly talking about the past, the future, and the lessons learned. "I never imagined," Sifo said softly, "that my son would have someone like you in his life." I leaned back, looking out the glass wall at the city that stretched beyond. "Neither did I. But sometimes life surprises you, and those surprises are worth holding on to." Sifo nodded, understanding. And somewhere deep inside I realized. My life, once defined by wealth, control, and isolation, had found meaning in a small boy who had taught me more about love, trust, and family than any boardroom or business deal ever could. The storm had passed, but the journey was far from over. And yet, as I watched them sleep, safe and unafraid, I felt the weight of the world lift slightly. For the first time in a long while, hope felt permanent. And that was a gift worth every challenge, every fear, and every sacrifice.